Mattress, the easiest way to get the right mattress.
NBC News special report.
This could be a very severe hurricane.
Hurricane Ian hits.
This one historically is going to be way over the top. Time to hunker and prepare for the storm.
Reporting from Bradenton, Florida, Lester Holt.
And good day, everyone. We're coming on the air from here in Florida with breaking news as the hurricane now makes its way onshore, starting to come ashore. It's a devastating Category 4 with wind speeds topping 155 miles an hour. And it is on track to hit the U.S. The governor here warning of widespread damage, even death, especially worried about those who didn't heed evacuation orders. It's not just powerful, the winds, but also the extreme flooding, a big concern here. Storm surge forecast to reach up to 18 feet expected to swallow parts of Florida's southwest coast as it comes ashore within the next several hours. We want to go right now to Kerry Sanders in Punta Gorda, Florida now with the latest from there.
Well, Lester, what we're seeing right now are those early gusts that you get before a hurricane actually hits here. Some tropical force winds, maybe of about 40 miles per hour. Those who heard about the increasing storm surge, residents in this area who thought it was going to be 6, maybe 9, maybe 10 feet, hearing about the possibility of 16, 17 feet, have gotten very nervous. And so, like refugees, they have been driving down this road, going into a parking garage, going up inside that concrete parking garage with their cats, their dogs, getting up on the 2nd and 3rd floor to ride the storm out there because they don't believe that when they get this all said and done that they'll go home and find their houses dry. Their fear is that the water will be on the floor, maybe even to the ceiling. The local authorities here have told those who did not evacuate, you're on your own at this point. There's not going to be a fireman or a firewoman, and there's not going to be any police responding to you if you dial 911. So when they use the word hunkering down, that's exactly what's going on right now. People are preparing. What is a storm surge? Just very quickly, with those winds that could be 150 plus miles per hour, it blows across the surface of the water. It builds up, more water going up, 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 and it has nowhere to go, so it goes in. And that wall of water, that storm surge, has nowhere to go but inland. And so in the red zone, that was a mandatory evacuation. In the orange zone, that was a mandatory evacuation. It now could be even beyond that, 2 miles into the final yellow zone that people are going to find there's water at their feet, maybe as high as their mattresses on their bed. Lester?
Yeah, Kerry, I just returned from a shelter near Sarasota where they're concerned that not a lot of people, they have people there, but not as many as they thought, still trying to urge people who haven't done so in those mandatory evacuation areas to move into these shelters. I want to go to Sam Brock. He is near Sarasota. What are the conditions right there right now, Sam?
Lester, look, this has been a slow crawl right now to the coast, but certainly alarm bells are up right now. And speaking about those evacuations in Sarasota County, it's about 430,000 or so people. The guidance up until today was largely for people who are in mobile homes, RVs, and low-lying areas to get out. But now we're looking, Lester, at a situation where the storm surge is projected to be somewhere in the neighborhood of 6 to 10 feet. 6 to 7 historically in this part of Southwest Florida was as high as they had ever seen before. It's a sort of piggyback on what Kerry was just saying a second ago. 12 to 18 feet. Picture the fact that a typical 2-story house is about 20 feet. So that storm surge, that wall of water that is coming in, can get all the way up near to the top of someone's roof. That is a possibility here. In Sarasota, over my shoulder, this is a downtown area that really is popular for vacations, for retirement. It's a beautiful, charming place to just get away. It is sitting on a bay not far from where I'm standing. On the other side of the bay, all that separates it is a barrier island. On the other side of the barrier island is the Gulf, which is to say, like many parts of Southwest Florida, completely surrounded by water in so many locations. Where is all of that water going to go when it rushes in? Lester, I did have a conversation with a hospital CEO just a little while ago, because you think about the population here in Florida, as the winds start to pick up here right now, all the older folks that need health care, what are their families thinking right now? There were no preemptive evacuations for Sarasota Memorial Health, but what they had to do this morning was actually evacuate folks in a behavioral health department because the building itself was too old to withstand a Category 4 or potentially 5 hurricanes. Some of their buildings are brand new, but many of them are not. They're looking at potentially evacuating an ICU at some point today, but your window for doing something like that is certainly shortening right now. So there's so many angles, Lester, to think about this, but let's remember that Governor DeSantis and President Biden were talking about listening to the evacuation orders. This is why some 3 million Floridians faced evacuation orders. Hopefully many of them heeded those, but now it's too late to get out. It's getting too dangerous.
The people were taking it seriously, but here in Tampa, the worst is yet to come. Lester?
Morgan, thanks. We're going to end our special report for now. We'll come back as news warrants for many East Coast stations. We'll be back with more coverage right after a short break.
With Instacart, you can choose from hundreds of retailers to get your favorite snacks.
Weather forecast with Exact Track 4D today at Buckcock. This is an NBC News special report.
This could be a very severe hurricane.
Hurricane Ian hits.
This one historically is going to be way over the top. It's time to hunker down and prepare for the storm.
Reporting from Bradenton, Florida, Lester Holt.
Good day, everyone. We're coming on the air from Florida with breaking news. The worst of Hurricane Ian is shore right now. It is a devastating Category 4 storm. Wind speeds right now topping out at 100 miles an hour. On track to be one of the most powerful storms to ever hit the U.S. The governor is warning of widespread damage, even death. We're getting in some astonishing images of the extreme flooding, the storm surge intensifying right now, an absolutely devastating situation. In some places, the forecast to reach up to 18 feet in terms of storm surge and up to swallow parts of Florida's southwest coast. It's getting so bad that first responders can't head out to save anyone who stayed behind after those mandatory evacuations earlier in the week. High winds have already knocked out power for hundreds of thousands. We have our correspondents spread out across the storm zone. I want to go right now to Steve Patterson. He's in St. Petersburg, Florida, to describe the situation there. Steve?
Lester, the situation is rapidly deteriorating. A band of rain and wind moving in as I speak. It is moving in pretty hot and heavy here, and we are not anywhere near the bullseye of this storm. We are several miles north now. As Ian makes landfall, the bay is to my right shoulder. It has pushed out, so low tide right now. High tide will come in later, bringing more flooding with it and more surge. That is the worry from everybody here. Even if the surge doesn't reach 8 to 12 feet like it's supposed to do, a little bit south of here, devastating surge could be anywhere from 3 to 5 feet because of how low-lying this area is. And as the rain moves in, it's been falling, I would say, for about the last 20, 30 minutes solid now. That could lead to catastrophic flooding. The winds, of course, picking up, turning into hurricane force winds. It's now to a situation where I have to brace my knees in order to talk to you as the winds pick up. The flooding, though, is the primary concern. It's not the brunt of what happens now. It's the continuation of what happens later. As this storm keeps moving slowly, moving at about 3 to 4 miles per hour, the speed that you and I might walk, that will continue to dump rain in this area. And as it does, the risk for flooding goes up. Not only that, power outages are a major concern. Hundreds of thousands could be facing devastating, catastrophic power losses. Utility companies have moved into this area. There are something about 40,000 line workers in this area. The National Guard mobilized as well. 5,000 Florida National Guardsmen on the ground. FEMA trailers in place. But the primary warning for people in this area is now to shelter in place. It is too late to escape this. You need to hunker down and wait out the storm. The bands of rain now moving in, the bands of wind now moving in as the upper edges of this storm start to scrape past St. Petersburg. Lester, back to you.
All right, Steve Patterson. Steve, thanks. Technical problems. I'm unable to hear your report, but the picture says a lot right now as we watch those waves lap behind you there and the rain begin to pelt you from those bands that are increasing in their intensity along this coast. Sam Brock is near Sarasota, Florida. Sam, the authorities have really reached a critical point in all this. One they warned us about, at which point they would no longer be in a evacuation mode or able to respond to 911 calls.
Yeah, that alert went out within the last 20 or 30 minutes, I would say, Lester, that the 45-mile-per-hour sustained winds threshold had been reached, which is to say that Sarasota sheriffs are not able to come out onto the roads to rescue you in the event of an emergency. And I will say anecdotally, as we stand here in a parking garage, protected largely from the elements of what's going on around us, I am feeling stronger wind gusts. In fact, in the last couple of minutes, strong enough, you'll probably see it over the course of this report, it actually shook one of the cars in the garage, and the car alarm went off. So we're starting to get to that point. It really, though, Hurricane Ian moving at a crawl as it gets to the coastline. Everyone here waiting to see what that's going to mean, both in terms of the surge. We saw those images out of Naples, cars already with water levels up to really the bottom part of the window. Will we see a replication of that here in Sarasota? Also the rainfall totals, though. Lester, when you look at the projections, record-shattering rainfall potentially on that I-4 corridor, all the way from Tampa out to Orlando. When you're talking about 15 to 20 inches of rain, that is in 2 to 3 days the amount you would typically see in 2 to 3 months. On top of that, for those who have not driven around Southwest Florida, whether it's going from Tampa to St. Pete or you're driving through Port Charlotte on I-75, you're really low on those bridges and roads. In fact, the sea level is basically right at your car. So to think about what's going to happen as we anticipate high tide coming in and raising that storm surge, plus all of the rain that is coming down and being distributed throughout this area, and you could be looking at a very dangerous sort of combination of events all happening at the same time. So as we look forward right now, what is the governor going to say? Because Mr. DeSantis, governor of Florida, is about to make a public address right now. Last we heard from him, his messages were we have 40,000 people at the ready to restore power once we get to that. As Steve mentioned a second ago, 5,000 National Guardsmen also ready to and able to act when needed. We know that neighboring states have contributed some 2,000 guardsmen as well, so it's really more like 7,000. Everyone right now is on edge and really at the ready, depending upon what the calls are going to be. But we are at a fragile state at this exact moment. Sarasota this is the downtown area over my shoulder, is starting to see some of those blasts, though, Lester. No water in the streets just yet, but wind gusts that are swaying trees, certainly, that we know are above 45 miles an hour. And the projections at this point, 90 to perhaps 100 miles an hour within the next several hours. But it's just the outer bands right now. I can't state that enough. It's going to get a lot worse very soon. Lester?
Sam, thanks very much. NBC meteorologist Bill Kerry is standing by. Bill, it's a little after 1 o'clock here in the east. Walk us through the next several hours as this storm makes its way onshore.
Yeah, I think we'll probably get landfall sometime in the next 2 hours. We're now watching Captiva as the first area that's getting into the relatively calm eye of the storm. You can see that right here. Here's Captiva. They went through that northeast quadrant of the storm. Sanibel had a wind gust reported at 98 miles per hour when it went through. And so we know there's a lot of wind damage. There's also a lot of storm surge, too. And the eye is clear out enough on satellite imagery that we're probably, for people, some of the storm chasers that are out there, they will see the sun come out when they get into the center of the storm. And you'll see pictures they call it like a stadium effect. You'll actually see the thunderstorm clouds in the distance, and it will look like you're in a football stadium on the field looking up. That's what it's like to be in the eye of a storm, and it's very rare to be in one where you actually can have the sun shining, but because we're kind of in the middle portion of the day, that's what they're likely going to show. So that's what's happening with the center, and that's the eye coming on shore. The extreme wind warning, it continues now here around Inglewood all the way down to Boca Grande, and that's going to extend inland as that eye moves on shore. As far as the storm surge goes, I like showing up in the wider view here. The winds are blowing offshore. So that's why you're seeing pictures from Tampa Bay, the Sarasota area. That water is not piling up yet at the coast. It's blowing out into the Gulf. It's on the backside of the storm. Once that hits you, that's where the strongest winds are because the air is flowing faster over the water. There's no friction like it is over land. Typically in the northeast quadrant is when we have the strongest winds. Not this time. It's going to be on the south side of the storm as the eye goes by. And that's when the water's really going to pile up in areas like Fort Myers. It's building now. now. I've seen pictures of, streets with water on them that are supposed to be dry. We showed you the video minutes ago of the Naples area with cars that are already, with water up through the doors. I've seen pictures of mailboxes that are now submerged in the Naples area. That's only 6 feet of water. That's kind of the beginning. That's not supposed to be the hardest hit area. Further to the north is supposed to be even worse than that, and that's what's going to happen throughout the rest of today. And we're hitting high tide in the next 3 to 6 hours at the same time. So here's where the storm is located. That rain shield is huge. We do have a threat of tornadoes. We had about 6 of them reported yesterday, included one that flipped airplanes at Hollywood, near Hollywood, Florida, at the private airport there. So that's a danger, too, even away from the center of the storm. And as we track the strongest winds tonight, of course, that's where we're going to get the worst wind damage, the most structural damage. That's where we're going to have the most power outages. And we've shown the hurricane wind potential with the darker maroon colors here. That's where you're almost guaranteed to lose power as we go throughout the next 24 hours. And that extends pretty far inland here, all the way up here through Osceola County, almost into Orange County. We do expect significant power outages in the Orlando area. Will it be bad as Charlie, where people didn't have power for up to 2 to 3 weeks? We'll wait and see how that materializes later tonight. But again, 70 miles per hour winds will leave its mark. And then eventually the storm will head north and even make a second landfall into Georgia. Nothing like it is now. That'll be a tropical storm, minor power outages, and some minor storm surge issues. But again, Lester, the big headline right now is that we're going to get that landfall of the eye within the next hour or two, and we're also seeing the worst of the storm surge, which means that the worst of the damage is now happening, and people are just wondering, how's my house? So many people evacuated, and they may not have that answer for tomorrow, maybe the day even after that.
Yeah, Bill Cairns, thanks. I was at a shelter earlier, and people were obviously wondering that same question. They made the difficult decision to get out, but certainly wondering what they left behind and what they will see when they return. Well, let's go. All right, Mayor Gutter, thank you much. We're going to end our special report for now. We'll come back as news warrants for many stations in the East and Central Time.
All good, man.
Gotta start believing in me, kid.
We're back from here in Southwest Florida watching Category 4 Hurricane Ian rapidly approach landfall that could come within 2 hours. But right now, it's not just the wind, but the water that is simply shocking. In just the last couple of hours, that storm surge filling up cities, the potentially deadly record-shattering rainfall stalling across the southwest coast. The water is getting so high that first responders will not be able to help anyone who stayed behind. And just moments ago, Florida's governor warned it is only getting worse. Let's go to Steve Patterson right now. He's in St. Petersburg, Florida, to update the situation there. Steve?
Lester, it is only getting worse, and it's not anywhere close to the worst part of this storm, especially in this area. Over the next few hours, the rain will increase, the wind will increase, but it's already slamming into us right now. Wind gusts that we felt, tropical force at least, possibly hurricane force, so bad that I'm having to brace my knees. This is St. Pete's Pier, so the bay is behind me. You can see it. Low tide right now. Won't be high tide for another few hours. When that happens is when things get truly dangerous. When this storm moves in, makes landfall, settles over this area, and then moves at a crawl, spreading rain across the entire bay, and possibly flooding, catastrophic flooding in this area with the amount of rainfall that is expected, not only today, but possibly over the next few days. That's the truly dangerous part. That's the part that we're worried about with utilities. That's the part that they're worried about with the sewage. That's the part that they're worried about with low-lying areas and all the real estate that has been built up along Tampa Bay. That is what is so dangerous. In the meantime, the wind and the rain is still picking up. Since I last spoke to you, I think it's picked up a few more miles per hour. This is something that has now been consistent. It first came in at bands, and now it is sustained winds, sustained rain, and we can expect a whole lot more of this as the night moves on. Remember, this is nowhere near the brunt of the storm, nowhere near the eye of the storm, nowhere near where landfall is going to be made. We are a few miles north of that, but just in those outer bands, and what we're seeing already now, this is expected to be devastating even in this area. Lester.
All right, Steve Patterson, thank you. Let me go right to Kerry Sanders. He's south of me in Punta Gorda, Florida. I know things were getting worse last time we checked in with you, Kerry. What are they looking like right now?
Lester, the rain is pelting, the wind is blowing, and I think the remarkable example of Mother Nature's power here is that I'm right now at Charlotte Harbor Marina, and almost all of the water here has been sucked out of the marina. And as we sort of turn the camera over this direction here, you can see the wind that is blowing. That's blowing south. Remember, this is the counterclockwise nature of the hurricane. We're not going to go too far out here because clearly we don't want to get ourselves into a situation where it could be dangerous, but this is sort of the opposite of the storm surge where the water is all being pulled out. In fact, you can see right down here all the water from the Peace River here in Charlotte Harbor gone. Look up there at the boats. Some of the boats there are leaning on their keels because they're already. To note that as this water is being sucked out, depending on how the eye wall makes its way to this area, then everything reverses and the storm surge would then come back in. And again, we're talking about a storm surge that could certainly cover the area where we're standing right now. So we're going to go over here behind this wall just to get a little bit of protection. It takes a little bit of your breath away in the middle of this. But truly, just look at these. All the boats in the marina just sitting on their hulls right there in the mud, in the sand, and it's all been sucked out here. And remember, high tide will be at around 6 p.m. tonight, and this is going to be going on for a while. I hope this picture sort of demonstrates a little bit of what the hurricane's doing so that people don't feel the need to maybe run outside and take a look themselves. We're doing our best to stay safe, Lester.
Yeah. And we appreciate that. And in fact, we're seeing behind us, we've been watching the same thing, the water kind of going out right now, seeing those same kind of winds. Let me go to NBC meteorologist Bill Cairns, who has the latest. And Bill, perhaps you can drill down on Punta Gorda, where Kerry is, and describe what you're seeing weather-wise.
Yeah, and hopefully Kerry, our good friend, is still listening. So Kerry's located right here. So here's Port Charlotte. He's in Punta Gorda, located right here. That's where the winds are blowing out. Kerry and all your crew, our NBC friends out there, you only have literally about 5 minutes before that northern eye wall is going to arrive on top of you. So right now, we could hear the winds howling behind you. Looked estimated, possibly 70, 80 miles per hour. Your winds are going to jump potentially up there to 100, 120 as we go through this northern eye in about 5 to 10 minutes from now. So I guess my advice to you and your crew is get to the safest spot you have. I know Kerry is such a veteran at doing all this. They know exactly where to go. Kerry, explain to everyone how safe you're being and how you know where to go.
Yeah. Are here because we're
Yeah, Lester
is built out of concrete. It allows us to get up off the ground like 2-3 stories if we need to. But most importantly, it gives us a structure that protects us from the winds. And then, of course, we can always retreat into our vehicles. Now, most of the parking garage is full because there's a lot of refugees, people who said, oh, I'm going to ride this storm out. Then they changed their minds and said, not with the storm surge that we're hearing that's going to be far more than 9 feet. And so they pulled in, made their way into the parking garage where we are, along with several other media organizations. And, well, I'm going to run and get to the car here. Bill, we're going to do this pretty quickly. So I'm going to cut out right now.
Yep.
Give you one.
Yeah, and we're starting to lose our.
And we're going to get into position because.
Yeah, we're starting to lose our shot there with Kerry as that northern eye is approaching his Punta Gorda location there. Again, that's right here. You see these bright red colors? Those are the thunderstorms with the northern eye that are about to move right over the top of him and our crew there. So we wish them the best as they head through the eye. And they should actually, in about an hour from right now, maybe 2 hours, be in the center of the eye. Kerry may actually be in the center with clear skies and sunshine. And obviously, if we can bring you those pictures safely, we will. But the first priority is to keep that whole entire crew safe. So why did we see the boats that were on the floor of the harbor? That's been the scene up the coast. Remember, all of these winds, even 60 miles per hour now at Tampa, so we're losing power once you get above about 50. That's blowing the wind out of all these bays and all the harbors. The wind on the south side is the wind that's blowing it inland. That's why we showed you with Allie in the Naples area, cars that have water on them, cars that were flooded. This is the highest water level ever measured in Naples from any storm in their recorded history. It looks like it peaked somewhere between 5 to 6 feet. So that's what 5 to 6 feet looks like. Obviously, you know, for the people that own these vehicles and everything else and the houses that had the water in them, it's catastrophic for them. But just try to picture what double that is going to look like. And that's what's heading in the next couple hours for Fort Myers and for Cape Coral in those areas. When they go through, once the eye passes inland, this backside, this bright red, the strongest winds over the water, when that comes on shore is when the water levels are going to rise very fast. So right now, the eye is finally arriving in areas like Fort Myers. So you've got the worst winds, and now you're starting to see pretty extreme wind damage. But the surge damage is going to trail that by a couple hours, just to keep you abreast of how that's going to play out. We mentioned that the winds are expanding. Tampa with that 60-mile-per-hour wind. So that's why we're going to have power outages, not just where the eye makes landfall, but pretty widespread right up through the I-4 corridor. The hurricane hunters. So these brave men and women go and fly into these storms for us. And by all reports from the hurricane hunters, they've been saying that it's the most extreme they have ever been into an eye of any hurricane. They fly into all of them. They flew into Michael. They flew into Ida. They flew into Sandy. They flew into Katrina. One aircraft says that they dropped 1,000 feet. You ever been on an airplane and you have, you know, all of a sudden the turbulence and you drop like that? They dropped 1,000 feet. Can you imagine what that would have felt like? So the stories we're going to hear from this storm, the eye is just that intense, Lester. This is an unbelievably powerful storm that is going to change the lives of about 1 million people. It's starting now, and it continues during the day today. You know, it's very sad that all of these people, you know, hopefully have evacuated, and they're just waiting to see what it's going to be left. And we won't know. There's like a fog to war, I kind of call this, after all these hurricanes. We won't know tonight during the overnight hours when it's dark. It won't be till sunup tomorrow if we can get the helicopters up for everyone can finally, you know, take a look and see just how bad it was.
Ends Monday.
Okay, this might be the best day ever. First, I got sent a sweatshirt by Lizzo. Thank you, Lizzo. And guess who is here?
The very severe hurricane.
Hurricane Ian hits.
This one historically is going to be way over the top. Time to hunker down and prepare for the storm.
Reporting from Bradenton, Florida, Lester Holt.
And we are in St. Petersburg, Florida. I'm Steve Patterson joining you on St. Pete's Pier. This is where the brunt of the storm in this area is coming in now. Walk with me. I may have to lock my legs down as I walk, though, because of the wind picking up now. It has been solid for probably about the last hour and a half or so. The rain and wind blowing sideways. You see some people who are curious, obviously, about what's happening here. We've seen tourists come in. We've seen residents that I would assume are now trapped, can't get out, trying to take a look at the bay. And the bay is incredible because of the tide. The tide now, low tide, incredibly low. You can see the tide sort of coming in and drifting out. It's being pushed back toward the storm itself, toward the Gulf of Mexico. It is actually almost pushing the wind and hydro energy towards it, and it will come back as high tide comes in. That is what federal, state, local officials are most worried about, is this surge period where you have the storm surge, you have a deluge of rain because of how long is expected to settle here. This storm is expected to move at a snail's pace. We're talking somewhere around 2 to 3 to 4 miles per hour. The time in which it takes you and I to walk naturally is how long that storm will just sit and stay here, dropping water for hours and hours and hours. That puts us in danger for so many things. One, the utility battle, already something that is very much of top of mind right now with the amount of wind damage, utilities, those power poles knocking over, not only knocking out power, but the possibility, as we saw in Naples, of causing fires, of causing more structural damage. And then on the back end of that, catastrophic flooding. If we have a storm surge that is above 5 feet, that is above 6 or 7 feet, that will lead to a very dangerous situation with the potential for so much rain in the forecast. That could cause a lot of damage, particularly because Tampa Bay, this area, built on very low-lying areas. Tampa Bay is built up about billions of dollars along the storefront here, along the lake, the bayfront. And so much of that is on a low-lying area that it could mean that it's at risk for flooding. Even if the storm surge was something like 3 feet, it would still cause damage. But what we're predicting now, about 6 feet in this area, this, remember, was the bullseye not too long ago. Yesterday, as early as 24 hours ago, this was predicted to be the eye of the storm, making landfall here and not to the south of us. It doesn't matter. The damage is still being done. We can still feel the wind, the rain coming in solid, and we're not really going to get the brunt of it until about 3, 4, 5 more hours from now. Maybe 8 or 9 o'clock is when the true brunt of this storm will make landfall in this area. And then the coinciding tail end of that is what federal officials, state officials, again, are so worried about, that catastrophic flooding which is possible in this area. We're keeping an eye out for it, but for now, the wind and the rain is enough. Back to you.
Steve Patterson, thank you. And like you, we have seen the water essentially move out behind me. There's a pier, what had been a floating pier, now grounded in the sand. We're covering Hurricane Ian. It's a Category 4 storm, as you've likely heard. The wind speed's about 155 miles an hour. While it hasn't made landfall officially yet, the effects so far are shocking. The storm surge is coming in fast and furious in places described by one official as a tsunami, pushing inland. Expected to get as high as 18 feet in some places. Signs of disaster around us, a dangerous mix of water and fire. We saw storm damage, power knocked out in Naples, and you see that fire, an apparent arcing power line. Thousands are already without electricity across many parts of this state. Also, many places, the water too high, the winds too strong for first responders. They had warned folks things would reach a point that they would not be able to respond to 911 calls and come to help until after this has passed. The worst, however, is yet to come. We heard Steve Patterson noting that the water, the surge will intensify a bit later on in the evening, even as the storm moves through. Let's go to Sam Brock right now. He's near Sarasota, Florida, with the latest from there. Sam?
Lester, it's good to speak with you. We just got an update from Governor DeSantis here within the last 30 minutes or so, talking about the fact that we have somewhere in the neighborhood, obviously, of 3 million people in Florida who were issued evacuation orders. The good news here is he said most of those people did evacuate. The bad news, Lester, is that some people did not, and there are no options for them at this point. What the governor is recommending to all of those folks up and down, really, the Florida Peninsula and the Southwest Spine is for them to fill out forms online in the event they weren't able to make it to evacuation centers, so at least authorities, when they are able to go in and rescue people, know who's where in terms of their location, their home location, so it's been documented. But right now, all counties across the state of Florida, right, there's 67 of them, 11 which issued mandatory evacuation orders. None of them can act right now to actually help anyone until the storm passes. Those are the standing orders. Now, in terms of other resources the governor discussed in terms of buttressing what is going to be, of course, a likely days-long emergency operation, we're looking at 9 helicopters already here, he says, with another 20 plus on the way, a couple hundred boats for those swift water rescues that also will take place. That's coming courtesy of the DOD as well. FEMA with some 700 personnel already on the ground in disaster zones. So these are all the resources that are at hand. The problem, as you've been talking about all afternoon long, is that once you get to 45 miles an hour or higher for sustained winds, first responders are not in a position to act. And that's the situation that we're seeing playing out right now. I'm in Sarasota, about 15 minutes to an hour north from where this is expected to make landfall. As you look over my shoulder right now, there's still been bursts of wind gusts that have approximated 70, maybe 80 miles an hour. But For the most part, it's been more around that 45 to 50 mile an hour range. At one point, it was strong enough to actually shake the cars in the garage, which I'm currently situated in, to set off a car alarm. And we are expecting these conditions as the storm moves forward to affect us more deeply here. Of course, what you're seeing in Naples, in Fort Myers, that intense flooding is likely a result of the fact that they're on the southeastern portion of where the eye wall is right now. But it's possible that we could be seeing very similar conditions here in just a matter of hours. Now, as far as hospitals go, I spoke with the CEO of Sarasota Memorial Health earlier today. And you just think about Florida and the demographic that serves here. A lot of older folks and families who are no doubt concerned about loved ones here. What I was told is they did not do any preemptive evacuations, but they have a pretty large footprint. They have about 4 or 5 buildings between regular hospitals and standing ERs. Some of them are brand new. They've been built in the last 6 months. Some of them were built decades ago and are in no position to handle a Category 4 or almost borderline Category 5 storm. I am told that an ICU unit was moved already to other buildings, as well as the behavioral health department. So you can see the urgency right now that's being taken across the board. Lester?
Yeah, officials trying to adapt to not just the forecast, but what they can see with their own eyes. Thanks, Sam. Ryan Lamb is the Emergency Management Director for Cape Coral, Florida. Ryan, as we noted, emergency services have been suspended because of the high winds. So what happens for people who call for help right now?
So right now, when someone calls 911, we are logging those calls for police, fire, and ambulance service, and we're going to get back out to them as quick as we can once the sustained winds drop below 45 miles per hour.
Yeah, all your planning for this moment, and certainly over the last several days, at this point, do you feel like you were just spectators waiting for this thing to move past so you can act?
Yeah, so we have a plan in place so that as soon as those winds do drop, we can go back out with front-end loaders and clear the roadways and get our police, fire, and ambulances back out there. However, right now, we are getting reports across our community from folks working here in our EOC of damage to their property. We are getting reports of significant roof damage around our area and catastrophic damage to some structures, including I was just informed that we have some damage here to our EOC that I need to go tend to here shortly.
Are you seeing any of the effects of the storm surge that we've all been warned about?
We've lost some of our cameras in the south part of our city that we would see those storm surge. We saw the initial push based on the counterclockwise rotation. We are waiting to see once the storm passes us to get that counterclockwise rotation that would give us the push back inshore. So we're not seeing the worst of it quite yet. That's still yet to come. So we're waiting with bated breath. And right now we are dealing with the eye wall. We've felt the pressure drop, and we're dealing with what appears to be some catastrophic damage around our city to our structures.
We know the population goes up and down here in this part of Florida. Roughly how many people are in your city at this time of year?
210,000 individuals. Based on the evacuations, we asked for the evacuation of 165,000 of those individuals. Unfortunately, we had a low uptick in the number of people that actually went to our shelters and evacuated. So we're very concerned about the life safety threat in our community. So as soon as those winds go down, our #1 priority will be going out there and trying to save lives.
All right, Morgan, thank you. Let me go to Ali Velshi in Naples, where some of the most dramatic pictures so far have been coming from with that storm surge occurring around those condominiums behind us. Ali?
Yeah, let me tell you, I want to, Randy, be careful as you do it this time, because the wind has really picked up. We are now right about at high tide. We're about 5 minutes away from high tide here in Naples. We also have winds reported, gusts up to about 112 miles an hour, so it's gotten a bit more serious. But the underlying issue is still the same, and that is that there's no delineation anymore between the Gulf of Mexico and Naples. This was a motorway, a parking lot. Earlier, I showed this to you. There were cars on the left and cars on the right. Now there's just cars pushed back and on the middle. As that surge pushes in, as Randy's showing you, the cars are being pushed further and further into the street, and we're seeing much more debris now. We're seeing much more happening. We're now at probably 5 feet, I would estimate, of surge. We were looking at 4 to 6. Take a look at that white car over there, Randy, on the left. Now almost entirely submerged. There were several cars around it. We're now looking at possibly 8 feet of surge here in Naples, and we're not at the worst of it it yet. So there have been warnings about shelter in place. Do not attempt to move. Bill Cairns always reminds us your car can start to float away in 6 inches of water. We're now in about 5 feet of water. But what you're seeing here is the actual surge that you and I talk about so much when we cover these hurricanes. This is actually the Gulf of Mexico surging water into Naples and the surrounding areas. Lester?
All right, Morgan, thank you. We are going to end our special report for now. We'll come back on the air as news events warrant for some of our stations in the Mountain and Western time zones. Our coverage continues with NBC News Daily after the break.
I wore this suit in honor of the outfit you wore the other night. That is the, again, highest rated moment.
Very frank, telling people who stayed behind that no one is coming to save them right now. It is simply too dangerous for first responders to get out there right now.
Let's turn to Kerry Sanders. He's in in Florida for us, in Punta Gorda, Florida. Kerry, you've been getting some of the worst of this so far. Bring us up to speed on what you're dealing with there.
We're getting hammered right now. These are some of the strongest winds that we've seen from this hurricane so far, at times blowing down this direction to the point that I've had to take a knee because it's so strong. Interestingly, there is still power here. Whoa, there we go. That's the kind of wind gust I'm talking about there. We've seen some down trees, down tree limbs. I was going to say, interestingly, there is still power in this area, but those gusts are particularly strong. Just a short distance from here, I mean, just 2 blocks is where Charlotte Harbor and the Peace River meet, and all the water was sucked out because the counterclockwise rotation of the hurricane was pulling the water south. It was, quite frankly, something I'd never seen, really quite remarkable. Boats just sitting on the bottom of I'm going to take a knee here because the wind's picking up, guys. There we go. See that? That's the kind of wind of a hurricane, really. Whoa. All right, so you're probably wondering, how am I here and the camera is so steady? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move myself closer here because I'm going to show you our camera has a position which is behind a building. If I can push my way through here. And then when I get behind a building, you can see as I get behind the building here and just sort of catch my breath here, all protected. So the buildings are holding. We've seen some rooftops sort of like dangling and shaking, but we haven't seen anything pulled off. But we got a long way to go with this one, guys. Actually see, it's a good thing I moved because of you can see there's a couple other people out here. There's a parking garage down this way, and that parking garage is where a lot of, I guess I'll call them refugees, people in their 60s, 70s, 80s years old who didn't want to go anywhere, and then at the last minute decided they put the dogs in the car, the cats in the car. They made their way up into the parking garage for some protection. So, I've got this giant wall right here. This is part of okay, here we go. Let's listen. And there are people right now who are inside their homes with the shutters down. They don't know what's going on outside. They hear things maybe hitting the house. They hear that eerie sound. It can be really quite disturbing, but you're seeing what maybe they're not, unless they still have power and they're getting the pictures that we're sending to you right now, Kate.
As well, and what's going on there in Punta Gorda. And as we look at the map behind you there, this is an area that's sort of shielded north of Fort Myers, but still already seeing these strong winds and these bands of heavy rain, right?
Kerry is in the eye. I mean, it's amazing that you saw a car driving up high in the background. Yeah. You saw some people on the sidewalk next to him, and oh well. But yes, they are in the northeast eye right now. Still lightning strikes. This is where Kerry is located. See the bright red on there? Those are the thunderstorms that we're watching right over. They're about halfway through the northeast eye wall, so they still have about another 5 to 10 miles of progress of the storm to go. That's literally going to take about another hour before Kerry and his crew get into the clear eye. And Captiva has been in the eye of the storm now for a while. They are in the center of the storm. We're very close to getting that official landfall designation, so it gets all the way over here, almost over the top of where Kerry is located. And remember, the worst of the storm surge is south of that. And if Kerry can still hear me, I don't know if he can or not, this is going to be a very different storm for Kerry and his crews than other ones. A lot of hurricanes we've had lately didn't have a strong backsides to them. The winds on the backside of the storm will probably be stronger than what you're seeing with Kerry and his crew right now. Right now, it looks like they're estimated, I'd say, anywhere between 80 to possibly up to 90-mile-per-hour gusts on the backside of the storm. After the eye passes, it's going to be clear, it's going to be pretty calm, and then when the winds come in from the backside, that's when we could see 120 to 130-mile-per-hour gusts.
Some of the strongest winds we've felt so far from the hurricane. I'm taking a knee here because, quite frankly, if I stand up, I think I'll get toppled over.
Yeah, you could easily see some debris flying back and behind you. You know, so far so good with some of those roof structures and some of those trees in the background there. But yeah, I'd say, you know, they're getting close up there, probably to almost Category 2 gusts where Kerry is located right there now. But Kerry will be at northern eye walls all the way up here to Venice. So anywhere from Inglewood to Venice, that's where you're going to have a lot of Category 1, Category 2 wind damage. The south side, we've lost our wind sensors from the Naples to Fort Myers area with the high winds. This is in the backside, is when that comes through, that's when the storm surge is going to be peaking. So we expect the storm surge to peak close to high tide in the Fort Myers area, right around about maybe 5 p.m. to about 9 p.m. this evening in that region. And then we're going to take the storm inland. And once it finally crosses over land and gets to about where Kerry's located in Punta Gorda, that's when the weakening will begin. The friction of the land and the trees and the buildings will begin to slowly weaken the storm, but very slowly. You know, guys, you know, we only can show you so many, you know, dramatic images and pictures. We probably, I'm sure we're not showing you the worst, but we have to keep our crew safe at the same time also. Trust me, there's a lot worse out there happening right now than what you're just listening, what we can show you.
Hey, Kerry, can you still hear us? Give me a thumbs up, Kerry.
Ready for you.
I'm not sure if Kerry can hear us anymore. Bill, let me go back to you then. And just
I got you.
Oh, you got me.
Is
Okay.
that Kate?
Yeah, that's Kate. It's Kate Marin. So we're just going back and forth. I'm wondering about those people that we just saw behind you. Are there still a lot of people around?
Well, a lot of them are storm chasers.
Okay.
They're mostly storm chasers. All guys, all between 20 and 25 years old. Most of them with YouTube channels.
Gotcha.
And they say they've chased tornadoes. For some of them, they tell me this is the first time they've ever been to a hurricane. You know, I heard Bill talk about lightning. We had a lightning strike here that caused everybody to move. It was so bright and so loud, and I suspect we will see more of that. You know, again, where I'm standing, I've got a little bit of a protection. So if I just take a few steps back, you can see how much stronger this wind is. Well, there we go. See, it's weird. Now there's no wind, and then I take a little bit further out. It's really not that bad. I'm just going to move in, you know.
Yeah,
I think you got the idea of what the strength of the wind is. There's no reason to stand there and try to make my way. Hang on a second. There we go.
And Kerry, you
make my way back here.
You make a good point about how these sorts of storms can change up at the turn, you know, on the drop of a dime. You have different conditions, which emphasizes what makes them so dangerous for people who perhaps didn't evacuate in areas where they should have evacuated.
You know, one of the things that you're looking at, you know, can be very confusing because you see me out here, and even though I've covered, you know, almost 40 years of hurricanes, it's just experience. There's no real, like, this is the way to cover a hurricane. I've got a helmet on, I've got some eye protection. So there are some people say, so why would I, like, not do what Kerry's doing and go out and walk around in the hurricane?
With Exact Track 4D, today at 5 on Local 4 News.
Oh, this is gonna be good. Okay, y'all. I love surprises.
This is an NBC News special report.
This could be a very severe hurricane.
Hurricane Ian hits.
This one historically is going to be way over the top. Time to hunker down and prepare for the storm.
Here now, Kate Snow and Aaron Gilchrist.
Good afternoon. We're coming on the air with this breaking news.
We are getting a look at the devastating damage Hurricane Ian is already bringing to Southwest Florida. You can see some of the images here. The storm surge, the flooding, just astonishing at this point. In downtown Naples, Florida in particular, the mayor is calling it the worst she has ever seen.
And the winds are picking up as well, while the Category 4 hurricane still technically has not made landfall because the eye has not crossed onto land yet. The wind gusts are already so powerful, more than 90 miles an hour recorded just recently in Punta Gorda.
And Kerry Sanders is in Punta Gorda, Florida for us now. The winds there starting to hit pretty hard. Kerry, talk to us about what you're dealing with right now.
Well, we're definitely past 90 miles an hour right now. The wind is definitely picked up. I think you can get the demonstration of how strong the winds are here. So I'm going to move in a moment, but I'm waiting for just the gust to quit just for a moment. We're still a little bit away from the eye wall. So if the winds are going to be up at around 150 miles an hour, my guess is that was about 110, maybe 115 miles per hour. Okay, so now I'm protected by a building. I'm in a place where the wind is not going to get me, but I want to sort of just step a little bit out of the way and show you what we're looking at here. So what we're looking at here down the street is only 2 blocks away. Going to get me, but I want to sort of just step a little bit out of the way and show you what we're looking at here. So what we're looking at here down the street is only 2 blocks away from Charlotte Harbor. The power of the wind blowing the rain is remarkable. I mean, I've stepped out of the way, but when those raindrops are hitting your face, it hurts. It's like sandblasting. That's an incredible, yeah, we're definitely moving into the highest winds, which is why I'm staying back here in the area that's a little bit much better protected. I want to just point out here, see that stop sign that bent there? That stop sign that bent there, that's just from the wind. I mean, it took the whole metal and just brought it down. Maybe in the background you can see a few tree limbs that are blowing. And bottom line is we're seeing stronger and stronger winds, and there is more to come. Guys?
Kerry, for those that are just joining us on the network right now, set the scene for us. You're near Port Charlotte, you're near the bay. What's happening with the storm surge and the water?
You know, that's been the big question, and I went over to Charlotte Harbor and the Peace River, which sort of meet there, and it was actually remarkable because there goes, see, there's the tree limbs and stuff like that we're trying to stay away from. The counterclockwise nature of the hurricane pulled all the water out of the harbor, and so the boats that are moored there are actually sitting on the bottom of the seabed or the Gulf of Mexico or the riverbed there, and the sailboats are on their keels have come over, but all the water was sucked out. Now, as the storm comes in, that will potentially change, meaning that the storm surge will come. I'm 5'5". The storm surge is anticipated to be somewhere from 12 to maybe 17 feet. So it's possible on the backside of the storm, we will see some flooding here. And if you're wondering, well, where will we go? We will retreat to a concrete parking garage. And in that concrete parking garage, we can get up and get some protection there. In fact, a lot of people who live here in Punta Gorda decided to stay put. And then when they started hearing about the storm surge threats, they chose to actually get in their cars before the storm turned into what it is right now, make their way into the parking garage, and basically with their cats and their dogs and their cars and ride it out, hurricane refugees.
Yeah, Kerry, that's what I was wondering about. There are so many places along the coast there where evacuation orders were put in place. People had to get out. I'm wondering what you know about how many people are still there in that area. I saw somebody standing off to the side. It looked like he was leaning up against a tree to take a photo. Have you seen a lot of people moving around as the winds have been picking up where you are?
No, I mean, the few people that are out here, I'm sorry, I'm going to turn off my phone because I'm getting those tornado warnings, which is where we are too, so that's a whole other thing. The few people that I've seen out are really storm chasers. They're not even people from Florida. They've come here from Texas. They've come from other parts of the country as they're storm chasing. But no, you don't really see anybody out other than maybe a few reporters and some of those storm chasers. I just listen to this. It's really picking up. So, you know, I talked to Jim Cantori from the Weather Channel a short time ago, and he thought we were going to be in the eye wall and then in the eye maybe in less than 45 minutes, which explains why everything is getting so much more powerful right now. And, of course, Bill Cairns has been looking at our satellite map, looking at where we are with the GPS, and he's got a pretty good idea. Let me just sort of show you one thing up here. Take a look up there at the palm tree right there. We're going to go in on the palm tree, and you can see the power of the wind just blowing those palm trees. Mother Nature has it pretty much figured out. Trees like that have withstood hurricanes for a long time. They have a very narrow trunk, just the palm fronds at the top, and then the root structure. So I'm not sure we're going to see too many of the palm trees in this area come down. We will see some, but we will definitely see power lines down. We'll see roof shingles off, and we'll likely see even some roofs and maybe some collapsed homes. Guys?
Yeah. For people who haven't been watching all day like we have, once that goes by, they'll have some calm for a while as the eye goes over. But then Bill Cairns, our meteorologist, was saying the other side could actually bring even more wind than what you're seeing.
And that's going to be the story in the weeks ahead.
All right, meteorologist Bill Cairns. Bill, thank you.
Sam Brock is with us. He's in Sarasota, Florida, which is north of the places that we've most recently checked in with, and you're getting an alert there.
I figured that might be apropos. Kate and Aaron, good to talk with you. Let me read it to you. Take cover now, all caps. Shelter in place, extreme weather warning. So you heard that very sobering assessment from Bill Cairns just a second ago when you saw the counterclockwise rotation on the funnel. And what you're looking at right now is a situation in Sarasota where we're right on the edge of that sort of northwest quadrant of the eye wall, just above it. And the winds here, guys, I can tell you right now, the wind gusts have approached triple digits. It's interesting to kind of lay this out geographically in the context that we talked to Steve, who was out there in Pinellas County, and then Kerry just before that, who was in Punta Gorda. We're right in the middle in Sarasota. I've been refreshing the power outage numbers just to try to get a sense, really, of where we stand relative to everybody else. Florida right now is a state. 800,000 customers, no power at the moment. Now, 37% of the customers in Charlotte County, which is where Kerry is, have no power. We're actually at almost 40%. And yet Kerry, when you watched him during his live shot, first was clinging to that sign. The sign then ended up on the ground. We saw images of the power poles bending in the wind during Kerry's shot, but the figures are actually worse here than they are in Charlotte County. But this is going to be a problem we'll be talking about for the days ahead. Certainly right now, fear for life and the fact that not enough people got into shelters when they were told specifically to get out of evacuation zones, but also access to electricity. If you look up the definition of a Category 4 storm and what that means for communities, it will say uprooting of trees, snapping of power lines, isolation of areas, and no access to power for weeks or months at a time. That's the scenario we're looking at potentially right now. We did get a briefing, guys, from Governor DeSantis about an hour ago, let's say. And he said that at the moment, they have 40,000 people on standby getting ready to jump in and try to fix some of those electrical issues when they can, before we can even get to that stage. Of course, right now, rescues could be in order. But that 45-mile-per-hour wind threshold is when emergency responders cannot legally go out and try to help people because it's too dangerous. That's where we are in Sarasota. That's where most folks are right now in this general region, Southwest Florida, as the concerns continue to ratchet up. And this is just, I mean, you're looking behind me right now. It's relatively calm versus what we just saw 5 minutes ago. Steve was saying every 5 or 10 minutes, you'll see a wind gust. Yeah. We did get one of those that actually pushed me up the stairs that I was walking on. I had to go backwards. So that was sort of the rarity right now. I feel like instead of that being the exception, though, it might be much more common in these coming hours. So no doubt there's a state of emergency. You have a couple hundred almost shelters throughout Florida, but people can't get into them at this point. The guidance from Governor DeSantis, if you were left at home, is to submit online documentation as to where you are so they can look if they're not able to touch base with everybody after this all clears. Ken and Aaron, let me send it back to you.
Sam Brock in Sarasota for us. Sam, thank you.
Let's turn to Ali Velshi. Have a storm this strong coming ashore. It takes a while for it to burn itself out, if you will. And that's something that we're going to be, this is a storm we're going to be watching for hours and hours to come. And then the effects of this storm.
For days.
Days or weeks ahead before we start to see things get anything close to normal across all of Florida as a result of Hurricane Ian.
We're going to end our special report right now. We will come back on the air when news warrants that. For those watching on NBC News Now or some of our NBC stations in the Mountain and Pacific time zones, we will be back in a moment with more coverage on NBC News Daily.
I can't hear you. Say it again.
amazing.
This is an NBC special report.
This could be a very severe hurricane.
Hurricane Ian hits.
This one historically is going to be way over the top. Time to hunker down and prepare for the storm.
Here now, Kate Snow and Aaron Gilchrist.
Good day. We're coming on the air with special coverage of Hurricane Ian. The predictions that you just heard, unfortunately, are coming true. Ian made landfall a short time ago. I'm Kate Snow.
And I'm Aaron Gilchrist. It was a powerful Category 4 storm that's causing damage really all along the west coast of Florida right now. It is not accustomed to major hurricanes like this, that area.
And it was about an hour ago that it made landfall near Fort Myers, Florida. It is cutting northeast now through the Sunshine State, but very slowly. Meteorologists and first responders are stressing the situation is dire. Storm surge is projected to be historic. We're already seeing flooding across several different cities. It is potentially life-threatening.
And keeping the lights on is another major concern at this hour, really, again, across the state of Florida. Right now, more than 800,000 customers without electricity. That's according to poweroutage.us. The National Weather Service describing the storm surge there, the wind, the flooding, all these things coming together, being described as catastrophic.
And just to mention, when we spoke to Lee County, the Fort Myers area, we spoke to an official there just a while ago who said there are calls for rescues coming in for search and rescue, people trapped even in their attics on some of the barrier islands. And right now, the storm is still there. They can't get to those people. They can't go out.
Let's turn to Sam Brock now. He is near Sarasota, Florida for us today. And the conditions where you are, Sam, they look like they've gotten worse.
Yeah, Aaron, Kate, it's good to be with you. This has definitely changed quite a good deal since we last spoke, maybe 30 or 40 minutes ago. This is State Street in downtown Sarasota. You know, it's weird and it's eerie to be walking down the street right now where normally I come here regularly, see people buzzing everywhere, and now it's just obviously empty. But what we're seeing now that we were not really until about an hour ago are intervals of 80 to 90, maybe triple-digit wind gusts. As I walk around here, you'll see the trees swaying over my shoulder, the street signs on the corner. We're bending at one point. Not right now. I'm looking at garbage cans floating back and forth in the street. Now, we're not seeing a storm surge at street level yet. However, what we are observing is a lot of calls coming in, according to Sarasota officials, for help. And those folks cannot receive it because they've already hit the threshold we did a couple of hours ago at that 45 mile per hour or higher wind level gust, and they can't get out there. So you have some portion of people here who are told to evacuate, who thus far have not. And now this is no man's land. With nowhere to go except to hunker down. The advisory from Sarasota was to make sure you're in the interior part of your home, away from windows, as we're seeing again, those gusts get very high. And Governor DeSantis, we are expecting a briefing, guys, in less than an hour. As he's already said, there's 5,000 plus National Guardsmen at the ready when they can. Let me send it back to you.
All right, we'll keep an eye out for that briefing. Sam Brock for us. Sam.
Thank you.
We are joined now by storm chaser Ben McMillan. He's in Punta Gorda, Florida, where conditions have been deteriorating. Ben, your experience dealing with these things, how bad are conditions getting where you are?
Well, your meteorologist just said it. It's not done yet. It's extremely windy here still in Punta Gorda, and you can just see there's trees snapped. There's pieces of the roofs of these buildings that are coming apart. It's like a war zone. We're hearing explosions. We're hearing crashes. And let me tell you this. This is the biggest problem. There's pieces of debris everywhere, and they're just getting picked up by these winds, and they become missiles. So for anyone trying to be out here, this is why the governor of Florida tells you to evacuate. This is why local first responders can't respond, because it is like a war zone. They have constant pieces of debris that can be hurting themselves, hurting their vehicles, and it's just not a safe situation. And here in Punta Gorda, we actually will be entering the eye of the storm. That is where the lowest pressure is very shortly here, and there will be a sense of calm that may overtake the area. That's an area where the winds are much lighter than what you see that I'm standing in now. I want people to know that's not a sign the storm is over. The backside of the eye will eventually move in and have just as strong, if not stronger, of winds as the first part of the eye. So it tricks a lot of people. We want them to keep hearing you for the latest information and make sure they know exactly when the storm is really up for real.
Ben, this is Kate.
Patterson for us on the Florida coast today. Steve, thank you.
That concludes our special coverage of Hurricane Ian. You can follow more live updates right now on NBC News Now.
And we will have much more tonight on NBC Nightly News with Lester Holt live from Florida. Thanks for joining us.